The penthouse on Fifth Avenue was quiet in the way only expensive places ever were, insulated from the city's noise, sealed behind glass, marble, and money. Hannah Miller stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, rocking her 9-month-old son against her chest while trying to slow her breathing. She was 8 months pregnant, her back aching, her ankles swollen, her body exhausted from nights without sleep. Outside, the Manhattan skyline glowed, indifferent and beautiful. Victor Langford's voice cut through the silence. "Stop pacing. You're making me nervous." Hannah froze. She adjusted her grip on the baby, whispering softly so he would not cry. The child's small fingers clutched her shirt, his cheek warm against her skin. She had learned that even the smallest sound could irritate Victor when he was in this mood. He stood near the kitchen island, scrolling on his iPhone, his jaw tight. A half-empty glass of whiskey sat beside his MacBook, still open from a late meeting. Hannah recognized the look in his eyes. Something had gone wrong today, and somehow it would become her fault. "I just need some air," she said carefully. "He's been fussy all evening." Victor looked up slowly, his expression darkening. "You always have an excuse," he said. "Do you know how you make me look?" Hannah did not answer. She had learned silence was safer. The elevator chimed softly. A moment later, Claire Donovan stepped inside, heels clicking confidently against the marble floor. She wore a fitted black dress and a smile that did not reach her eyes. She did not acknowledge Hannah at first, only walked straight to Victor and kissed his cheek. "You ready for tonight?" Claire asked lightly. "The plaza is expecting us." Hannah's stomach tightened. Victor glanced at Hannah, then back at Claire. "Almost." Claire finally turned, her gaze sliding over Hannah's pregnant body and the baby in her arms. Her lips curved upward in something close to amusement. "Wow," she said. "You look tired." Hannah felt heat rush to her face. She shifted her weight, a sharp pain pulling low in her abdomen. She swallowed it down. "I'm going to put him to bed," she said. As she moved past Victor, Claire's heels scraped loudly. Victor's patience snapped. "I said stop walking away from me." Hannah turned too slowly. The slap came without warning. Pain exploded across her face. The force knocked her backward, her balance gone. She clutched the baby tighter, instinct overriding shock. Her foot slipped on the polished floor, and a violent cramp tore through her stomach. "Hannah," Claire murmured, not moving, her phone already lifted. Victor stepped forward, his voice cold. "Don't drop my son." Hannah hit the floor on her knees, gasping. The baby screamed, a thin, terrified sound. Her vision blurred as another wave of pain ripped through her body, warm fluid spreading beneath her dress. She looked up at Victor, trembling. "I think something's wrong," she whispered. Victor stared down at her, expression unreadable. Behind him, Claire smiled, the camera still recording. And as Hannah collapsed forward, clutching her child and her unborn baby, no one in that penthouse moved to help her. Outside the windows, traffic continued below, horns faint, lights flowing like nothing had changed. Inside, the baby's cries echoed off stone walls, unanswered. Hannah felt the room spin, her strength draining fast, fear swallowing every thought as the pain tightened again, deeper, sharper, more dangerous than before. This was only the beginning of her nightmare tonight. Hannah woke to the sound of her own heartbeat roaring in her ears. It felt too loud, too fast, as if her chest might split open. Cold pressed against her skin. The marble floor, she tried to move, and pain tore through her lower body, sharp and unforgiving. Her son was crying somewhere above her, the sound distant and panicked. "Hush, baby," she tried to say, but her throat refused to cooperate. Her vision swam. She blinked hard and saw Victor standing a few feet away, arms crossed, his face rigid with irritation rather than concern. Claire hovered beside him, phone still raised, eyes bright with excitement. "She's bleeding," Claire said casually, like an observation at a party. "That's bad, right?" Hannah dragged herself onto one elbow, gasping. Warmth soaked through her dress, fear flooding every nerve. "Please," she whispered, "call an ambulance." Victor exhaled slowly, as if she had inconvenienced him. "You're being dramatic." Another contraction hit. Hannah cried out despite herself, curling instinctively around her stomach. Her baby kicked weakly inside her, the movement sending terror through her chest. Claire tilted her phone, adjusting the angle. "This is insane," she said softly. "People are going to lose their minds over this." Victor shot her a warning glance, then looked back at Hannah. "Stop screaming. You'll scare the kid." The baby's cries grew louder, desperate. Hannah reached out, fingers shaking. "He needs me." Victor bent down, lifted the baby from her arms with a rough motion, and straightened. The sudden emptiness felt like being ripped apart. "Take him to his room," Victor said to Claire. "I'll deal with this." Claire hesitated, then smiled. "Of course." She walked away with the baby, his cries echoing down the hall. Hannah screamed, a raw sound pulled from somewhere deep and broken. "Don't," she sobbed. "Please don't take him." Victor's patience snapped. He crouched, grabbing her wrist hard enough to bruise. "You did this to yourself," he hissed. "If anything happens tonight, it's on you." Her strength vanished. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. She felt herself slipping, her body shutting down, her thoughts blurring together. Somewhere far away, a door closed. Music drifted faintly from Victor's phone, a reminder of the gala waiting for him. Life moving on, without her. The pain peaked again, unbearable. Hannah's body convulsed. She tasted blood where she had bitten her lip, tears streaming unchecked. "I can't feel him," she whispered, terrified. "Something's wrong." Victor stood, already turning away. "I'll call someone later," he said. "Clean this up." As he walked toward the bedroom, Hannah's vision went black. The last thing she heard was her baby crying behind a closed door, and Claire laughing softly, pleased, as if she had just won something priceless. Time stretched, meaningless. Hannah floated between awareness and nothingness, her body heavy, her mind screaming. She thought of mornings in small apartments, coffee gone cold, lullabies hummed off key. She thought of promises Victor once made, smiles that vanished after the ring. Each breath felt borrowed. Somewhere beyond the walls, elevators rose, doors opened, guests laughed. No one heard her. No one came. Her hand twitched against the marble, nails scraping weakly. She tried to pray, but words would not form. All she could do was hold on, silently begging her unborn child not to let go yet, not now. The silence pressed down, cruel, endless, merciless, as seconds crawled forward without mercy tonight. Her breathing slowed dangerously, each shallow inhale fading like a light behind closing doors. But fate was moving, and Victor Langford would soon learn. The first thing Hannah felt was cold air on her face, sharp and medicinal. A siren wailed somewhere close, then farther away, then close again. Her eyes fluttered open to blinding white lights above her, streaking as the ceiling rushed past. She tried to move, but straps held her arms still, firm and unfamiliar. "Stay with me," a man's voice said. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Hannah tried to speak. Only a broken sound escaped. Panic surged as she realized she couldn't feel her legs properly. The stretcher jolted, wheels rattling, and the smell of antiseptic filled her lungs. 38, possible placental abruption, another voice said quickly, heavy bleeding at the scene. "Where's my baby?" Hannah whispered. A paramedic leaned closer. "He's safe. Focus on breathing." "Safe." The word barely reached her before pain ripped through her abdomen again. She screamed, the sound swallowed by the siren as the ambulance sped through traffic. Minutes earlier, a housekeeper named Rosa had stood frozen in the hallway of the penthouse, her hands shaking. She had heard the slap, she had heard the screaming. When Victor and Claire left, laughter echoing as the elevator doors closed, Rosa had run. She found Hannah on the floor, pale, soaked in blood, barely conscious. The baby cried behind a locked door. Rosa didn't hesitate. She pressed her phone to her ear and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. Now, as the ambulance turned sharply, Hannah drifted in and out, flashes of memory colliding. Victor's cold eyes. Claire's smile, her son's cry cut short. At the hospital entrance, doors burst open. Nurses rushed forward, voices overlapping, hands everywhere. Hannah was wheeled under harsh lights, her dress cut away, her dignity stripped along with the fabric. Blood pressure dropping. "Prep the OR. Call obstetrics now." Hannah's fear crystallized into one thought. "Please live." A doctor appeared above her, eyes steady. "Hannah, we're going to take care of you and your baby. I need you to stay awake." She nodded weakly as tears slid into her hair. Across town, Victor Langford adjusted his cufflinks in the back of a black Mercedes. Claire sat beside him, scrolling through her phone. "Your wife's trending," she said lightly. Someone leaked something. It's blowing up. Victor frowned. Take it down. I can't, Claire replied. It's everywhere. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He ignored it. At the hospital, Hannah was rushed into surgery, lights blinding, voices urgent. The world narrowed to pressure and pain and the echo of a heartbeat that wasn't steady enough. A nurse squeezed her hand. You're not alone. The words cracked something open. Hannah sobbed as darkness closed in again. Outside the operating room, Rosa stood silently, her hands clasped, praying in Spanish. She had done one thing right tonight. And far above the city, Victor raised a glass at the gala, unaware that consequences had already been set in motion. Inside the recovery corridor, monitors beeped steadily, marking seconds Hannah could not feel. Surgeons worked with grim focus, hands precise, voices low. Blood was replaced, pressure managed, hope balanced on numbers flickering across screens. Somewhere nearby, a newborn cried, a reminder of fragile beginnings. Hannah floated in darkness, unaware of time passing, unaware of names being written on charts, unaware that decisions were being made that would bind lives together and tear others apart. Tonight would be remembered by many for champagne and applause. For Hannah, it would become the dividing line between the woman she had been and the woman she would survive to become. Nothing would ever return to what existed before after this irreversible night. Hannah surfaced slowly, as if swimming up through heavy water. The first sensation was pressure, deep and aching, followed by a steady beeping that refused to stop. She opened her eyes to a dim recovery room, curtains drawn, lights low. Her throat burned, dry and raw. For a moment she did not remember where she was. Then fear returned, sharp and immediate. My baby, she whispered. A nurse appeared at her side, calm and practiced. You're awake. That's good. Try not to move. Hannah's hand flew to her stomach. It was smaller. Panic surged. My baby, please. The nurse squeezed her hand. Your daughter is alive. She's in the NICU. She came early, but she's fighting. Tears spilled instantly. Relief crashed into terror, leaving her shaking. My son? He's safe, the nurse said. Child Protective Services brought him here with a social worker. The words landed like a blow. CPS. Hannah struggled to sit up, pain flaring. Why? Because of the injuries, the nurse answered gently, and because your husband refused to come. Hannah turned her face away, humiliation burning hotter than the incision pain. She remembered Victor's eyes, cold and dismissive. She remembered Claire's phone. A doctor entered, flipping through a chart. Hannah Miller, he said, meeting her gaze. You suffered a placental abruption. Another delay and we would have lost you both. Her chest tightened. Can I see her? Soon, he replied. First, we stabilize you. Hours blurred. Nurses came and went. Pain medication dulled the edges, but not the thoughts. When Hannah was finally wheeled into the NICU, the room hummed softly with machines and whispered hope. Tiny bodies lay inside clear incubators, fragile and fierce. There she was, so small, so impossibly small. Hannah pressed trembling fingers to the glass. I'm here, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Behind her, voices rose. A woman in a blazer spoke firmly to a uniformed officer. The father is refusing consent. Hannah turned. A social worker approached, expression careful. Mrs. Miller, your husband has declined to sign emergency guardianship forms. Until we resolve custody, your children remain under supervision. The world tilted. He can't, Hannah said. Please. We'll work through it, the woman said. But there's more. A report was filed alleging instability. Hannah laughed weakly, the sound breaking. By who? The social worker didn't answer. She didn't need to. Night fell again. Alone in recovery, Hannah stared at the ceiling, fear coiling tighter. She felt smaller than she ever had, trapped by paper and power. Then the door opened quietly. An older man stepped inside, silver hair, neat, posture straight. He carried no flowers, no smile, just presence. Hannah Miller, he said softly. I'm Richard Hale. I owe your mother my life. She stared, confused, exhausted. I don't understand. He pulled a chair close and sat. You don't have to, not yet. He looked toward the window, then back at her, eyes steady. But this ends now. Hannah felt something shift, subtle and dangerous, like a door unlocking somewhere far above her reach. Outside, unseen, Victor Langford's phone began to ring again. He did not raise his voice or make threats. He simply waited, certain, as if time itself answered him. In the hallway, alarms chimed and footsteps hurried, lives intersecting without pause. Hannah closed her eyes, breathing through pain, sensing the balance change. Somewhere beyond the hospital walls, cameras turned, documents surfaced, and favors were called in quietly. The night tightened, preparing to break, and nothing Victor controlled would remain untouched. Consequences arrived slowly, then all at once, rewriting futures, erasing lies, exposing cruelty, forever, publicly. Morning crept into the hospital room without warmth. Hannah lay awake, staring at the pale ceiling, listening to the rhythm of machines and distant footsteps. Her body hurt in places she did not recognize, a dull ache layered beneath sharper flashes of pain. Every few minutes she thought of her children, and every time fear tightened her chest again. A knock came. The social worker returned with a tablet and a thin folder. "There's been a development," she said. "Your husband has filed an emergency petition." Hannah swallowed. "For what?" "For temporary custody," the woman replied. "He claims you are unstable and a danger." The words landed hard. Hannah laughed once, then stopped. "He refused to come," she said. "He left me bleeding." "We documented that," the social worker said carefully. "But he has attorneys. Powerful ones." Minutes later, 2 lawyers entered, suits crisp, smiles polite and sharp. They spoke quickly, confidently, as if Hannah were not fully awake. Terms, conditions, evaluations, supervised visits. Hannah felt buried alive under language she could not fight. "I want my children," she said. One lawyer nodded. "That will be discussed." After they left, Hannah shook uncontrollably. She pressed the call button, but it was not a nurse who entered. Richard Hale stepped in, coat folded over his arm. "They moved fast," he said. Hannah's voice broke. "They're taking my kids." "Not today," Richard replied. He sat, opened the folder, and read without emotion. "Victor thinks pressure wins wars," he said. "He is wrong." He placed his phone on the table and made a call. He spoke quietly, using names Hannah did not know. When he ended the call, he looked at her. Rest. Across town, Victor watched headlines scroll across a television in a private lounge. Claire leaned against him, satisfied. "This will blow over," she said. "It always does." Victor's phone buzzed again. He answered, irritation turning to confusion. His accounts were temporarily restricted pending review, a permit delayed, a board meeting cancelled. At the hospital, CPS returned, their tone altered. "We're revising supervision," the social worker said. "You'll see your son today." Hannah cried, relief crashing through exhaustion. In the NICU, she held her daughter's tiny hand through a glove, whispering promises she would keep. Richard stood back, watching. Later, Victor arrived at the hospital unannounced, anger controlled behind a smile. He stopped when he saw Richard. "You," Victor said. Richard met his gaze. "Me." They stood in silence, measured. Victor felt it then, the first flicker of fear. Richard leaned closer and spoke softly. "This ends with your signature," he said. "Or without it." Victor's smile faltered. Somewhere deep, he understood. The game had changed, and for the first time, he was not in control. Security lingered near the doorway, pretending not to watch. A nurse paused, sensing tension, then moved on. Outside, rain streaked the windows, turning the city into blurred lines and shadows. Hannah closed her eyes, breathing through the ache, grounding herself with each slow count. She pictured her son's face, the weight of him asleep on her chest, the promise she had made to protect them both. Richard remained still, patient, relentless. Victor felt smaller with every second. He checked his phone again, then again, messages piling up, assurances evaporating. Somewhere, files were opening, calls were being returned, and doors were closing quietly. Hannah opened her eyes and met Victor's stare without flinching. For the first time, she believed she would survive this. Hope flickered, fragile yet stubborn, refusing extinction, promising consequences, justice, and a future she would finally choose herself with courage ahead. The gala at the Plaza Hotel glittered like nothing was wrong. Crystal chandeliers spilled light over silk gowns, tuxedos, and polished smiles. Victor Langford stood near the ballroom entrance, accepting handshakes, projecting calm he did not feel. His phone vibrated constantly in his pocket, each buzz tightening his jaw, each ignored call another crack beneath his confidence. Claire Donovan clung to his arm, radiant and triumphant. "Relax," she whispered. "They still adore you." Victor nodded, scanning the room. Donors laughed, cameras flashed, servers moved with practiced grace. This was his world, built on appearances, and he refused to let it slip tonight. He raised a glass, ready to deliver his speech. Across town, Hannah lay in her hospital bed watching rain crawl down the window. Her son sat beside her, coloring quietly under a nurse's watchful eye. She felt weak but alert, every sense sharpened by fear and resolve. Richard Hale stood near the door, reading messages on his phone. "They're waiting," he said. Hannah swallowed. "For what?" "For him to speak," Richard replied. "Timing matters." Back at the gala, Victor stepped onto the stage. Applause swelled. He smiled, steady, practiced. "Thank you for being here," he began. "Tonight is about vision, growth, and responsibility." A murmur rippled through the crowd as phones lit up. Whispers spread, subtle but fast. Victor hesitated, glancing toward the back of the room. Claire's smile stiffened. A screen behind him flickered to life. The video played without sound at first. A pregnant woman on a marble floor, a baby crying, a man's voice, cold, unmistakable. Victor's. Gasps erupted. Reporters surged forward. Cameras snapped wildly. The room descended into chaos. Victor turned, blood draining from his face. "Turn it off," he shouted. The sound cut in. Hannah's voice, trembling. "Please." Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Security rushed the stage. Claire stepped back, eyes darting. "This wasn't me," she whispered. Victor backed away, heart pounding. His phone rang again. He answered this time. "Victor Langford," a calm voice said. "This is a federal compliance notice." Across the city, Hannah closed her eyes as tears slipped free. She did not feel triumph, only release. Richard placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's begun." At the plaza, Victor was escorted off the stage, his protests drowned by shouting. Guests watched, stunned, as the man who controlled the room minutes ago lost everything publicly. Claire vanished into the crowd, abandoned. Sirens wailed outside, flashing lights painted the walls red and blue. Victor felt hands grip his arms, firm, unyielding. The cameras loved it. In the hospital, Hannah pulled her son close, breathing in his warmth. For the first time in months, she felt safe enough to cry openly. Outside her door, nurses whispered, aware history had shifted. Richard looked out at the dark city. He thought silence protected him, he said. He forgot witnesses survive. Hannah nodded slowly. She understood now. This night was not about revenge. It was about truth, finally refusing to stay hidden. She rested her hand over her healing body, feeling pain, fear, and strength coexist. Tomorrow would bring hearings, questions, and exposure she could not avoid. Yet tonight she breathed, anchored by the weight of her child and the quiet certainty of allies standing nearby. Outside, rain eased, sirens faded, and the city resumed its rhythm. Inside, Hannah promised herself she would tell the truth every time it was asked, even when it hurt. Survival had given her purpose. Justice was no longer abstract. It was moving, loudly, toward Victor. And consequences would arrive faster than anyone expected, without mercy, without negotiation or delay. Morning hearings began in a narrow courthouse room that smelled of paper and coffee. Hannah sat between a public advocate and a nurse, her posture careful, incision aching. Across the aisle, Victor's lawyers filled the bench, confident again, whispering and smiling. Cameras were barred, but tension pressed the walls. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The clerk read the emergency petition. Victor was absent, citing counsel advice. Hannah felt the sting, then steadied her breath. The advocate rose. She spoke plainly about medical records, police timelines, and the video authenticated overnight. She described refusal of aid, delayed response, and risk to minors. Each sentence landed like a measured strike. Victor's lead attorney countered smoothly, framing stress, misunderstandings, and privacy violations. He questioned Hannah's stability, mentioned postpartum history, suggested manipulation, Hannah's hands trembled. The nurse squeezed gently. Then Richard Hale stood. He did not introduce himself beyond his name. He requested the court take judicial notice of federal notices issued after the gala. The room shifted. Papers moved. The judge leaned forward. Richard spoke once more. "Immediate harm outweighs influence," he said. "Children require continuity." The judge ruled temporary protective custody to Hannah, supervised by the hospital's social team, pending investigation. The gavel sounded. Hannah exhaled, tears blurring her vision. In the hallway, reporters surged, blocked by deputies. Phones buzzed. A notification flashed across screens. Victor Langford under federal review, partners distancing. The narrative turned. Back at the hospital, Hannah was wheeled to the NICU. She watched her daughter breathe, tiny chest rising with assistance. A doctor explained risks and hope in equal measure. Hannah listened, memorizing every word, anchoring herself to the present. Later, CPS revised plans. Supervision lifted inside the ward. Hannah held her son without a witness clipboard. He slept against her shoulder, trusting and warm. She closed her eyes, letting relief wash through pain. That evening, Victor called. The hospital blocked the number. His message arrived through counsel, demanding mediation. Richard read it once and set it aside. "Tomorrow," he said, "they will ask you questions." Hannah nodded. Fear returned, quieter now. She practiced answers aloud, steady, factual, true. She understood truth was armor. Outside, dusk softened the city. Inside, alarms chimed gently. Nurses changed shifts. Hannah kissed her son's hair and pressed a finger to the incubator glass. "I'm here," she whispered. Somewhere across town, Victor stared at screens, watching allies evaporate. The machine he built to control outcomes now exposed him. He realized silence no longer protected him. Hannah lay back, exhausted but resolved. The night felt different, charged with consequence. Tomorrow would test her. Yet for the first time, she believed she could withstand it, because she was no longer alone, and the truth had finally found a voice. Monitors hummed steadily as night staff settled. Hannah reviewed the timeline again, grounding memory to fact, resisting panic. She recalled Rosa's call, the siren, the incision, the judge's words. Each detail mattered. Richard returned with tea, reminding hydration helped healing. He outlined next steps, interviews, affidavits, and a safety plan. Hannah listened, asking careful questions. She slept briefly, waking to check her daughter's numbers, then her son's breathing. Fear rose, then passed. She wrote notes on a pad, dates and names, practicing clarity. Outside, rain returned softly. Inside, resolve hardened. She would endure scrutiny, because endurance protected her children. The path ahead remained steep, but the ground felt solid. For the first time, she trusted her footing. Tomorrow promised confrontation. Yet hope persisted, disciplined and quiet, guiding choices, steadying breath, shaping testimony, anchoring courage through uncertainty. Sleep finally came, brief, fragile, necessary, restorative, tonight. Interviews began at dawn, quiet and clinical. Hannah sat at a small table, hands folded, answering questions from investigators who spoke gently but wrote everything down. She described the slap, the fall, the bleeding, the refusal to help. She repeated details until her voice steadied and the memories stopped shaking her hands. A female agent asked, "Did anyone witness this?" Hannah nodded. "The housekeeper." "And the camera?" Across town, Victor met with crisis managers who promised containment. They rehearsed statements, blamed stress, suggested reconciliation. Victor listened, numb, watching notifications stack like unpaid debts. Banks requested documentation. Partners paused transactions. Invitations vanished. By noon, subpoenas arrived. At the hospital, Richard coordinated quietly. He secured counsel for Hannah, arranged trauma support, and requested protective orders. He never raised his voice. People responded anyway. Systems moved. Hannah testified again in the afternoon, this time about finances. Accounts controlled, cards canceled, access denied. She explained how dependence became a cage. The room fell silent. Notes scratched faster. In the NICU, her daughter's numbers dipped, then recovered. A nurse smiled carefully. "She's stubborn," she said. Hannah laughed softly, grateful for stubbornness. Victor attempted to call. The line refused him. He paced, anger turning brittle. When a reporter confronted him outside his office, he said nothing. Silence now looked like guilt. That evening, a judge signed temporary restraining orders. Victor was barred from contact. Security was arranged. Hannah felt the weight lift slightly, like a knot loosening. Richard visited again. "Tomorrow brings disclosure," he said. "Emails. Transfers." Hannah nodded. She feared what would surface, yet wanted daylight. Truth, she had learned, did not need embellishment. Night settled. Hannah held her son and told him stories about brave turtles and slow winds. He laughed, unaware of headlines. She watched his chest rise, counting breaths, grounding herself. Elsewhere, Victor read leaked messages on a screen. His own words reflected back without context or mercy. He understood then that power depended on belief, and belief was gone. At midnight, Hannah wrote a statement in her own handwriting, clear and simple. She signed it, "Steady." For the first time, she slept without jolting awake. Morning would bring consequences. Tonight brought resolve. Monitors hummed softly as staff changed shifts, footsteps measured, voices low. Hannah adjusted her pillow and breathed through the ache, reminding herself healing required patience. She thought of Rosa, of sirens, of hands that chose action over fear. Gratitude settled, quiet and heavy. Richard returned with updates before leaving. Committees convened, audits opened, travel restricted. He explained timelines and risks, never minimizing, never alarming. Hannah appreciated the honesty. It felt like respect. Outside, winter air sharpened the streets. Inside, warmth gathered around small certainties. A sleeping child, a steady heartbeat, a promise kept. Hannah closed her eyes and practiced courage like a skill, repeating facts, accepting uncertainty, trusting process. Somewhere else, Victor faced locked doors and unanswered calls. The city did not bend. It continued, bright and indifferent, while his world narrowed. He sensed the end approaching, not with drama, but with paperwork and patience. Back in the ward, a nurse announced stable vitals. Hannah smiled. She whispered thanks, not to fate, but to effort. When the lights dimmed, she rested her hand over her heart and chose tomorrow. Resolve hardened, steady and quiet, as night carried her forward. It was enough to begin again, and she knew it. Tomorrow would ask much, but she would answer. With truth, patience, and love, she would endure. For her children, always, without fear. That promise anchored everything. Nothing could take it now. Ever again, never, she believed herself. Finally, disclosure day arrived with rain and subpoenas. Hannah sat in a small conference room beside her attorney, hands steady, answering as documents appeared on a screen. Emails showed patterns. Transfers showed intent. Timelines aligned with hospital records. The story no longer depended on memory. It lived on paper. An investigator asked about access controls. Hannah explained passwords changed, cards canceled, rides denied. She described isolation as policy, not accident. Her attorney nodded, guiding her gently. Each answer tightened the net. Across town, Victor faced auditors. He tried charm, then anger. Neither moved the process. Requests multiplied. Accounts froze. Travel paused. His crisis team resigned within hours, citing conflicts. He watched influence drain away. Back at the hospital, Hannah visited the NICU between sessions. Her daughter breathed with support, stubborn as promised. Hannah whispered updates, narrating progress like a ritual. Nurses smiled. Stability mattered. At noon, reporters gathered outside the courthouse. A brief statement was released. Factual and restrained. No names shouted, no accusations dramatized. The restraint spoke louder than outrage. Markets noticed. Partners noticed. Victor's phone lit again. This time, it was his board. Emergency meeting. Votes scheduled. He realized too late that silence could not outlast evidence. The room felt smaller. In the afternoon, a deposition continued. Hannah recounted the locked door, the refusal to call help, the video authenticated by metadata. She did not embellish. She did not apologize. Truth remained sufficient. Richard Hale appeared briefly, offering context about oversight procedures and duty to report harm. He spoke plainly, then stepped back. Authority did not posture. It clarified. By evening, a judge issued preservation orders. Records were secured, assets earmarked. Hannah felt relief and grief intertwine. Ending harm meant ending illusions. She returned to her room exhausted. Her son climbed into bed, careful of wires, pressing his cheek to her shoulder. She breathed him in, grounding. The nurse dimmed lights. Elsewhere, Victor watched a televised segment summarizing the day. His name scrolled beneath phrases he once controlled. He muted the sound. The apartment felt hollow. Hannah wrote in a notebook, listing next steps and small gratitudes. Tea, a warm blanket, honest counsel. She practiced patience, knowing momentum favored truth. Near midnight, a message arrived from the court clerk confirming schedules. She closed her eyes and rested, pain present but manageable. Resolve steadied her breath. Rain eased outside. Inside, a fragile peace held. Tomorrow would bring more disclosures, more hearings, more weight. Yet the direction was set. The path, though hard, led away from fear. Across the city, Victor stared at a locked door and understood that consequences rarely announce themselves. They accumulate, they arrive quietly, they stay. Hannah slept, holding both children in her thoughts, certain at last that survival had become something stronger. Justice was no longer abstract. It was happening. She dreamed of sunlight and steady ground, of mornings without fear. When she woke, monitors hummed, and her body ached, yet resolve remained. Calls arrived confirming schedules and protections. Friends she had not heard from sent quiet messages of support. A nurse adjusted pillows and smiled. Hannah drank water, breathed deeply, and prepared. The next steps would be harder, slower, and public. Still, she felt ready. Evidence had weight. Truth had allies. Her children had her. That knowledge steadied everything. Outside, traffic flowed and headlines refreshed. Inside, she counted breaths and chose patience. Tomorrow promised answers and consequences. She would meet them calmly, speak clearly, and protect her family. The future felt uncertain but reachable, shaped by effort, not fear. She trusted the process, the people, and herself now, completely, without hesitation, at last. The board meeting convened at sunrise in a glass tower overlooking the river. Victor arrived late, suit rumpled, confidence brittle. Faces he once commanded now avoided his eyes. The chair called order and read the agenda. Compliance failures, reputational risk, fiduciary duty. Each phrase sounded clinical, lethal. Counsel presented findings. Timelines matched deposits. Emails contradicted statements. Silence followed every slide. Victor attempted explanation, then accusation, then apology. None landed. The vote was called. One by one, hands rose. The motion passed. Victor was removed, effective immediately. Across town, Hannah received the news from her attorney. She closed her eyes, feeling no joy, only gravity. Accountability mattered. She asked about protections. The answer was yes. Orders held, contact barred, support extended. She visited the NICU, steadying herself at the sink, scrubbing hands. Her daughter slept, tiny and fierce. Hannah whispered, updates, careful to keep her voice calm. A nurse reported improved oxygenation. Hannah smiled, relief gentle and real. At noon, Victor faced agents executing warrants, boxes filled with files, drives cataloged. He watched, stunned, as his apartment emptied of certainty. A neighbor filmed, headlines refreshed. The fall became visible. Hannah testified again by affidavit, concise and factual. She described impact, not intent. She declined interviews. Her restraint framed the story. Public sympathy shifted, firm and quiet. Richard Hale met briefly with prosecutors, then returned to the hospital. He sat with Hannah and outlined the next phase. Indictments would take time. Custody reviews would conclude. Safety plans would continue. He did not promise ease. He promised fairness. That evening, Hannah held her son during story time. He asked why the room had so many beeps. She answered honestly, softly. He accepted it, trusting. She kissed his hair and breathed. Victor spent the night in a holding room. Lights too bright, bench too hard. He replayed choices, searching for leverage that no longer existed. Influence had evaporated. Consequence remained. Near midnight, Hannah wrote a letter to herself, dated and signed. She listed truths she would not forget. She placed it in her bag beside medical papers. Anchors mattered. Outside, rain cleared. The city reflected itself in wet pavement, moving on. Inside the ward, monitors hummed. Hannah rested, pain present, fear diminished. Tomorrow would bring formal charges, more hearings, more patience. She felt ready. When sleep came, it was deeper than before. Resolve had replaced panic. The arc had turned. The machinery of justice moved, slow and deliberate. Hannah trusted it now, because she trusted herself. Morning would ask again. She would answer. Before dawn, notifications arrived confirming bail conditions, travel limits, and asset holds. Hannah read them slowly, absorbing permanence. Nurses adjusted lines and smiled encouragement. A chaplain stopped by, offering quiet presence without questions. Hannah accepted the silence gratefully. She practiced breathing, counting to 4, then 6, then 8, steadying her core. Pain flared, then eased. She focused on what remained within reach: consent, truth, care. Her attorney checked in with a brief call, outlining schedules and expectations. Hannah asked for copies. Agency mattered. In another building, Victor signed forms with shaking hands, escorted between rooms. He searched faces for recognition and found none. Process replaced privilege. As light strengthened, Hannah stood with assistants and took 3 careful steps. Applause would have embarrassed her. She preferred the nurse's nod. Progress was private. She returned to bed, exhausted, satisfied. The day had begun. She watched the window brighten, imagined mornings ahead, and felt courage settle. The future remained uncertain, yet navigable. With support aligned and facts secured, she prepared to continue, patient and precise, protecting her children and herself, step by step forward. Charges moved from rumor to record before noon. Hannah sat upright as her attorney explained counts, statutes, and timelines. She listened, steady, asking only for clarity. Outside the ward, reporters gathered again. Quieter now, respectful. The story had weight, and weight changed behavior. Claire Donovan appeared in headlines by afternoon. Messages leaked, contracts surfaced. She released a statement denying malice, blaming pressure. No one amplified it. Sponsors paused. Invitations vanished. The glow around her dimmed fast. Victor's arraignment followed. Cameras captured his arrival. Shoulders tight, eyes flat. He pled not guilty through counsel. Conditions were read aloud. Distance enforced. Assets held. The judge's voice carried finality. The room exhaled. At the hospital, Hannah met with a victim advocate who explained compensation funds and counseling options. Hannah chose therapy and declined interviews. She wanted healing, not spectacle. The advocate nodded, appreciative. In the NICU, the ventilator settings eased. A nurse announced progress. Hannah laughed softly, the sound surprising her. She traced a heart on the glass, whispering encouragement. Hope felt earned. Later, Richard Hale arranged a brief press availability. He spoke once, carefully. He confirmed process, declined commentary, and left. The restraint framed everything. Public sentiment solidified. Victor attempted mediation through a back channel. Hannah declined. Her attorney documented the attempt. Boundaries were safety, not revenge. That night, Hannah packed a small bag. Discharge planning began. She would move to a protected apartment with medical support nearby. The idea frightened her less than she expected. Change no longer meant danger. A lull settled. Hannah read to her son, voice steady. He asked if they were going home. She said they were going somewhere safe. He nodded, satisfied. Across the city, Victor returned to an empty apartment under restrictions. He scrolled old photos, searching for leverage. There was none. Consequence does not negotiate. Before sleep, Hannah wrote another note, shorter this time. She listed 3 truths. Believe your body, document everything, accept help. She folded the page and smiled. Morning updates arrived early. A superseding indictment added counts. Claire retained counsel. Boards issued statements. The machine turned. Hannah stood with assistants and took a few steps again. Slower, but stronger. Pain existed. Fear did not. She thanked the nurse, meaning it. She sat by the window as sunlight climbed. The city looked ordinary, forgiving, immense. She felt small and powerful at once. This chapter closed without applause. That was fine. The next would open with care, patience, and time. Discharge paperwork arrived with signatures and schedules. Transport was arranged quietly. Security briefed routes and contingencies. Hannah listened, asked questions, and agreed. Preparedness replaced panic. In a small office, the advocate reviewed resources again. Therapy appointments, legal updates, childcare support. Hannah accepted what helped and declined what did not. Choice mattered. Victor's counsel filed motions overnight. Prosecutors responded by morning. Timelines shortened, pressure increased. The case accelerated. Claire attempted outreach through mutual contacts. Messages went unanswered. Her leverage evaporated as quickly as attention had crowned her. Before leaving, Hannah visited every nurse who had touched her case. She thanked them by name. Gratitude felt grounding. As she was wheeled toward the exit, cameras waited beyond glass. She kept her eyes forward. The doors opened. Air rushed in. The city continued. Inside the vehicle, Hannah closed her eyes and held both children close in her thoughts. The road ahead was long, but it was hers. She breathed, steady and present, accepting uncertainty, trusting process, choosing care daily, moving forward without spectacle, without apology, committed to safety, truth, and a future shaped by patience, courage, and love. She would endure, rebuild, and thrive. The protected apartment overlooked a quiet park, modest by Manhattan standards, but calm. Hannah arrived after dusk, escorted, exhausted, carrying nothing unnecessary. A nurse checked vitals, a social worker reviewed schedules, and security confirmed routes. Order replaced chaos. The first night was strange. No monitors hummed, no alarms chimed. Hannah lay awake listening to wind in trees and distant traffic, holding her son close while thinking of her daughter sleeping miles away under careful watch. Separation hurt, yet safety mattered. Morning brought routines. Physical therapy began gently, measured steps along a hallway, encouragement without pressure. Hannah focused on breath, balance, patience. Progress felt real, earned inch by inch. Legal updates followed. Prosecutors expanded the theory of the case, tracing money through shells and favors. A grand jury scheduled testimony. Hannah prepared, reviewing notes, practicing clarity. She refused dramatics. Facts were enough. Victor's motions failed one by one. Judges denied delays, conditions tightened, assets remained frozen. The board appointed interim leadership, distance hardened into permanence. Claire's counsel approached prosecutors, offering cooperation. Terms circulated quietly. Hannah learned of it secondhand and felt only resolve. Accountability did not require her attention. In the NICU, Hannah's daughter tolerated reduced support. Nurses celebrated small wins. Hannah recorded a voice message, played bedside, telling stories about mornings and birds and warm light. The nurse said the baby settled when it played. A counselor met Hannah twice weekly. They named trauma plainly, without shame. Grounding techniques helped when memories surged. Hannah practiced them nightly, choosing rest over rumination. Richard visited briefly, bringing groceries and updates. He spoke of patience, reminded her to accept help. He did not linger. Respect meant space. A court date arrived. Hannah testified behind closed doors, voice steady, timeline precise. Questions pressed. She answered. When it ended, relief washed through her like rain after heat. That evening, Victor accepted a plea framework through counsel, not yet signed. The news reached Hannah quietly. She exhaled, not celebrating, simply acknowledging movement toward resolution. Days passed. Discharge planning shifted to reunification. CPS cleared overnight stays once stability metrics held. Hannah prepared a crib, folded small clothes, practiced feeds with nurses. Anticipation trembled, bright and frightening. When her daughter finally came home, wrapped and tiny, Hannah cried without restraint. She held both children, careful and certain, feeling the circle close. Outside, the city continued indifferent. Inside, a family formed, protected by boundaries and truth. Consequences advanced elsewhere. Methodical and public, Hannah slept that night deeply, anchored by breath and warmth. Knowing justice does not hurry, but it arrives. Morning returned with paperwork and sunlight. Hannah signed forms, scheduled follow-ups, and learned medication rhythms. She practiced feeding, burping, swaddling, repeating motions until confidence replaced doubt. Sleep came in short cycles, yet energy grew. Friends sent quiet messages. One offered childcare, another meals, another silence. Hannah accepted selectively, honoring limits. Therapy continued. Breathing exercises steadied nights when memories pressed. Across the river, Victor's plea finalized. He admitted conduct, forfeited assets, accepted monitoring. Sentencing loomed. The system moved, deliberate and cold. Hannah did not watch coverage. She focused on weight gain charts, clean bottles, and naps. Progress felt ordinary, miraculous. At dusk, she walked the park path with the stroller, guarded but free. Leaves rustled. The city breathed. Hannah smiled, small and certain, choosing this life. Tomorrow promised school forms, court calendars, and patience. Hannah welcomed the work, believing care compounds. She would build routines, protect boundaries, and keep telling the truth, quietly, consistently, forever, for her children. She chose gentleness, discipline, and courage daily, trusting time to heal wounds fully and shape a safer future. Together. Sentencing week arrived with a hush that felt heavier than noise. Hannah woke before dawn, feeding her daughter by the window while the park lights dimmed. She moved slowly, careful of her healing body, steady of her mind. Today, she would attend court, not as spectacle, but as witness. The courthouse corridors smelled of polish and paper. Hannah entered through a side door with her advocate, holding a folder she knew by heart. She felt eyes on her, then felt nothing. Focus narrowed. Breath steadied. Victor stood when the judge entered. He looked smaller, older, stripped of certainty. Counsel spoke first, citing cooperation, remorse, restitution. The words floated, hollow. Then prosecutors spoke, detailing harm, leverage, refusal of aid, and financial coercion. Evidence appeared again, orderly and final. Hannah was invited to speak. She rose, hands resting on the podium, voice level. She described facts, not feelings. The slap, the fall, the locked door, the refusal to call help. She described the hospital, the surgery, the NICU. She described fear turning into resolve. She ended simply, asking for safety and accountability. The judge listened without interruption. When the gavel finally sounded, the sentence was clear. Custodial time, asset forfeiture, lifetime protective orders, supervision, no contact. The room exhaled. Victor closed his eyes. Finality settled. Outside, reporters waited. Hannah did not stop. She walked past, head high, into winter light. Relief arrived quietly, like warmth returning to fingers. That afternoon, Hannah returned home to routines. Bottles sterilized, medications measured, a nap earned and brief. The ordinary felt precious. Healing lived here. News broke again at dusk. Claire Donovan's cooperation agreement became public. She would testify in related matters. Sponsors cut ties. Her influence evaporated. Hannah felt no satisfaction, only closure. Richard visited with takeout and calm. He congratulated Hannah without celebration, reminded her to keep therapy appointments, and asked if she needed anything. She asked for time. He understood. Later, a letter arrived from the Victims Fund confirming assistance. Hannah filed it carefully, grateful for structure. She wrote thank you notes to nurses, concise and sincere. Night settled. Hannah rocked her daughter and told her about tomorrow. About parks and books and quiet mornings, about telling the truth and keeping promises. Her son listened, wide-eyed, absorbing certainty. Across the city, Victor was processed into custody. Cameras flashed once, then moved on. Power faded into procedure. Before sleep, Hannah read her old notes and crossed out fears that no longer applied. She added new goals, modest and real. Finish therapy milestones. Enroll her son in preschool. Take a class she postponed. Breathe. She slept deeply. Justice had arrived, not as spectacle, but as boundary. Morning would bring another day of care. Hannah welcomed it. At dawn, messages arrived from friends and strangers, brief and respectful, offering meals, rides, silence. Hannah accepted some, declined others, honoring limits she learned to keep. She reviewed calendars, court dates, therapy sessions, school tours, pediatric visits, and built a week that felt possible. In the kitchen, sunlight touched the counter, and she brewed tea, breathing steam like promise. She practiced gratitude without pressure, courage without noise. Outside, joggers passed, ordinary lives continuing. Inside, a family rooted. The story would echo online, debated and dissected, but here it ended differently. With boundaries held, consequences set, and care prioritized, Hannah chose forward motion. She closed the notebook, lifted her daughter, and opened the door to morning, carrying truth lightly, ready to live. Quietly, she promised persistence, patience, and protection, trusting time, process, and community to sustain healing, accountability, and hope for her children, herself, and the life ahead together. Spring returned cautiously, and with it came routines that no longer revolved around court dates. Hannah woke before sunrise, feeding her daughter while the park warmed outside. Her son built towers on the rug, narrating victories. Ordinary mornings felt radical after chaos. Therapy continued. Hannah learned how trauma lived in muscles and breath. She practiced grounding, naming objects, counting steps, choosing rest. Some nights memories surged, but she met them with patience, not panic. Healing was work, and she did it. Legal finalities followed. Restitution schedules were set. Funds transferred under supervision. A permanent protective order arrived by mail, plain and firm. Hannah filed it carefully, then exhaled. Boundaries were real. Richard visited less often now, by design. Independence mattered. He left groceries and updates and trusted her to lead. She appreciated the respect. Support without control was new and welcome. A letter arrived from a small design studio seeking a project manager. Hannah had applied months earlier, quietly. The role was flexible, remote, friendly, creative. She hesitated, then accepted an interview. Hope felt practical. The interview went gently. They discussed timelines, accessibility, and trust. Hannah spoke honestly about limits and strengths. She was offered a trial contract. She said yes. Days filled with planning, childcare blocks, feeding charts, deadlines. Hannah found rhythm. Work restored confidence without draining it. Each completed task felt like a stitch closing an old wound. News cycles moved on. The city forgot the spectacle. Hannah welcomed anonymity. She walked the park path daily, stroller rolling, greeting neighbors. Safety became habit. Claire's testimony concluded elsewhere. Sentences were issued. Hannah did not read details. Closure did not require consumption. One afternoon, the building superintendent introduced a neighbor who fixed a loose rail. His name was Marcus. He was quiet, patient, respectful. He spoke to Hannah, not over her. He waved at her son, smiled at the baby, and left. Weeks passed. Marcus crossed paths again, returning a misdelivered package. They exchanged small talk about weather and coffee. Nothing urgent, nothing loud. Summer approached. Hannah's daughter gained weight, strong and alert. Her son started preschool. Hannah attended orientation, heart full, steady. A message arrived from Marcus asking if she wanted company for a park walk. No pressure. Hannah considered, then agreed. They walked, talking about books and routes, sharing silence easily. There was no rescue, no promise, just kindness and consistency. Hannah felt something open, careful, and hopeful. That night, she wrote goals again. Finish the contract. Save. Rest. Remain open. She slept peacefully. The past stayed past. The future felt earned. Later, Hannah met with her attorney to finalize remaining paperwork, reviewing schedules, contingencies, and safeguards. The conversation was brief, professional, reassuring. She signed, thanked her, and left without dread. Control felt ordinary now. On a Sunday morning, Hannah invited Marcus for coffee in the building lobby. They talked about music, routines, and patience. He listened. He did not ask for details. Respect deepened trust. Weeks became months. The contract renewed. Savings grew. Therapy goals shifted toward growth. Hannah noticed laughter returning, unforced. One evening, after a long walk, Marcus asked gently if she would consider dinner sometime, slowly, on her terms. Hannah paused, checked her body, felt calm, and said yes. The answer surprised her with its ease. It felt like choosing forward motion without erasing scars, honoring boundaries while welcoming connection, and trusting that love could arrive quietly, responsibly, and with patience. built on mutual care, shared time, and steady presence over days, weeks, seasons, growing naturally, safely, and freely, with respect, warmth, laughter, support, and choice guiding every step from now on. Autumn arrived quietly, and with it came a sense of final closure Hannah had not dared to expect. Court documents no longer arrived weekly. Her phone stayed silent. The crisis rhythm faded, replaced by schedules that felt human. School drop-offs, therapy sessions, work calls, dinner baths, life steady and imperfect. Victor's sentencing details surfaced briefly in the news, then disappeared. Prison time confirmed. Assets redistributed. Foundations dissolved. The empire that once towered over her reduced to archived articles and case citations. Hannah did not read them twice. The end did not require witness. One afternoon, Hannah received confirmation of the final transfer from restitution funds. She sat at her desk, stared at the email, and cried, not from triumph, but from relief. The money meant safety. It meant choice. It meant her children would never be trapped by dependence again. She closed her laptop and walked to the window. Leaves drifted through the park, parents talked, dogs pulled leashes. Normalcy felt extraordinary. Work expanded. The design studio extended her contract into a permanent role with benefits and flexible hours. Hannah accepted after reviewing every line. Security mattered. Independence mattered more. She signed slowly, smiling. Marcus remained present, never pushing, never vanishing. He learned bedtime routines, waited outside preschool, fixed broken shelves without being asked. He showed up consistently, which mattered more than charm. Trust built itself quietly. One evening, as they walked the familiar park path, Marcus stopped. He looked nervous, honest. He spoke without rehearsed words. "I don't want to replace anything," he said. "I just want to build something, if you're willing." Hannah felt no fear. She felt clarity. She said yes. Winter arrived early. Hannah's daughter laughed easily now. Her son read simple books aloud with pride. The apartment felt warm, lived in, safe. Holidays passed without tension. New traditions formed naturally. A final letter arrived from the court confirming case closure. Hannah placed it in a folder, labeled and complete. She did not revisit it. Closure did not need repetition. At therapy, Hannah spoke about the future instead of the past. Goals replaced coping strategies. Confidence replaced vigilance. Healing revealed itself in small, consistent ways. On a clear evening, Marcus cooked dinner while Hannah watched her children draw at the table. She felt gratitude without guilt, joy without fear. Later that night, Marcus asked Hannah to marry him, simply, privately, without spectacle. No audience, no pressure, just choice. Hannah said yes, knowing this was not rescue, but partnership, not compensation, but love. The past no longer owned her story. Consequences had found their place. Justice had done its work. What remained was life, chosen freely, built carefully, and protected fiercely. And for the first time, Hannah believed happiness could be quiet, lasting, and entirely her own. She understood now that survival was not the finish line. It was the starting place. Every boundary she held, every choice she made, became proof of strength earned through endurance. Her children would grow with truth, not fear. Love would remain patient, not possessive. Power would be defined by care, not control. The city outside would forget the scandal, but inside these walls, values would endure. Hannah carried forward lessons carved by pain and sealed by justice, committed to protecting peace, choosing dignity, and building a future measured not by wealth or spectacle, but by safety, trust, and the quiet courage to keep going. She trusted time, accepted help, honored limits, welcomed joy, and allowed herself to believe that stability, kindness, and love could finally last without apology, fear, or hesitation. Every ordinary day ahead felt possible. Months later, the wedding was small and deliberate. No ballroom, no press, no speeches crafted for applause. Just a courthouse room filled with afternoon light and a circle of people who had earned their place there. Hannah wore a simple dress and steady confidence. Marcus stood beside her, calm, present, and entirely himself. Her son held the rings with solemn pride. Her daughter slept in a carrier against Hannah's chest, warm and heavy and real. When the judge asked if they consented, Hannah answered clearly, Yes. The word felt grounded, not hopeful, but chosen. Afterward, they walked to the park, the same path Hannah once feared. Leaves shifted underfoot. Neighbors smiled without recognition. Life continued, kind and unremarkable. That was the gift. Work flourished quietly. Hannah led projects, mentored juniors, and set boundaries without apology. Her savings grew. Her calendar balanced effort and rest. Therapy moved to maintenance. The past no longer interrupted sleep. Victor's appeals concluded. Denials followed. The record settled. Hannah learned of it by accident, a line in a brief article. She felt nothing sharp. Closure had arrived earlier. Claire relocated and faded from relevance. Hannah wished her no harm. Distance was enough. Richard attended the wedding briefly, hugged Hannah once, and left early. He trusted outcomes more than ceremonies. She sent him a handwritten note later. Gratitude, simple and complete. That evening, Marcus cooked while Hannah bathed the children. Steam fogged the mirror. Laughter echoed. The apartment felt permanent, in a way money never secured. They spoke about the future in practical terms. Schools, vacations, emergency plans. Love lived in preparation. Trust lived in follow-through. When night settled, Hannah stepped onto the balcony alone. The city hummed below. She remembered fear, marble floors, sirens, and breath held too long. She released it all. Happiness did not arrive loudly. It arrived as safety repeated until it felt ordinary. It arrived as respect, patience, and shared labor. It arrived as mornings without dread. Hannah returned inside and closed the door gently. Marcus looked up and smiled. The children slept. Tomorrow would bring carpools, deadlines, and groceries. She welcomed it. Justice had done its work. Consequences had landed. Love remained. For the first time, Hannah trusted the quiet. She trusted herself. She knew rebuilding meant vigilance without fear. Bills were paid on time. Doors were locked by habit, not panic. Conversations stayed honest, even when difficult. Marcus listened fully, and when he disagreed, he stayed kind. Disagreements ended with plans, not silence. Weekends brought rituals. Pancakes, library visits, long walks that tired the children into laughter. Hannah photographed moments sparingly, preferring memory to proof. Presence mattered more than documentation. At work, she declined overtime that cost peace. She negotiated pay with clarity. Respect followed consistency. Mentorship became mutual. She taught boundaries and learned patience. Friends gathered slowly, chosen carefully. No one demanded explanations. No one minimized scars. Support arrived as meals, rides, and childcare, offered without strings. When anniversaries of the night returned, Hannah acknowledged them quietly. She scheduled therapy, rested, and moved forward. Healing allowed remembrance without re-entry. The city changed seasons again. Snow softened edges. Spring returned with blossoms. Time did what time does when safety holds. One evening, Hannah wrote a final letter and sealed it. It contained gratitude for survival and forgiveness for herself. She placed it away, not to reopen. Life did not become perfect. It became possible. And possibility, she learned, was everything. With patience, courage, and care, Hannah stepped forward daily, choosing safety, love, and honesty, building a future measured by peace, trust, and shared purpose together for them. A year after the sentencing, Hannah stood in the kitchen, watching sunlight move across the table. Her life no longer revolved around survival. It revolved around intention. The children laughed in the living room, building something with blocks and imagination. Hannah listened to their voices without tension. The sound felt earned. Her work had grown steadily. Projects arrived through referrals, not urgency. She chose clients, set timelines, and protected rest. Boundaries held. Marcus entered quietly, coffee in hand. He kissed her cheek, familiar, grounding. Love remained consistent, never dramatic. They planned the week together. School forms, work calls, therapy check-ins. Partnership meant sharing, not saving. That afternoon, Hannah attended a community meeting about family safety. She listened more than she spoke. When asked, she offered facts, resources, and encouragement. No names, no spectacle. News from the past surfaced briefly online. An appeal was denied. The story ended again. Hannah closed the browser. In the evening, she walked the park with Marcus and the children. Leaves shifted, air cooled, safety felt ordinary. At home, Hannah organized documents, then set them aside. The file was complete. She reflected on how far she had come. Fear once dictated every choice. Now, values did. That night, Marcus asked about long-term plans. Hannah answered honestly. They spoke of stability, education, and presence. No promises were rushed. Trust continued building. Later, Hannah wrote in her journal. She thanked herself for choosing help, for staying, for telling the truth. Sleep came easily. Morning followed with calm. Hannah prepared breakfast, packed lunches, and reviewed her calendar. Life moved forward. She knew healing did not erase memory. It reshaped it. When challenges appeared, Hannah met them with patience. She no longer doubted her instincts. In quiet moments, gratitude surfaced, not for pain, but for survival. The future remained unwritten. That no longer frightened her. She stood at the window again, watching light change. She felt capable. This was the reward she earned. Autonomy, safety, love, and choice. No one could take it away. Hannah smiled, turned back to her family, and continued living, fully, freely, and without fear. She understood now that justice was not only punishment, but prevention. It created space for safer lives. Hannah committed herself to that principle. She volunteered monthly, supported shelters, and shared resources. Action replaced fear. Marcus supported her efforts, offering time and care. They modeled respect for the children, who learned safety through example. Evenings ended with stories and laughter. Nights ended with rest. The past stayed where it belonged. Hannah no longer measured herself by what she survived, but by how she lived. That understanding grounded her. Each day affirmed the same truth. Consequences mattered, and so did compassion. Balance was possible. Hannah embraced it fully, carrying forward with strength, patience, and grace. The story that once defined her ended. A better one continued. She welcomed tomorrow without dread, trusting herself completely. Home felt safe, love felt steady, life felt hers. She held that truth gently, knowing it would guide her through every season ahead, whatever came, without surrendering her voice, her boundaries, or her future. With confidence rooted in experience, Hannah stepped forward, present, resilient, and unafraid. The life she built stood firm, protected by truth, law, and love. Nothing could undo that. She breathed deeply, smiled softly, and continued on, choosing peace each day, for herself, for her children, and for the future they deserved, together, always. This was her ending, and her beginning, shaped by courage, truth, and earned freedom. Lasting beyond fear, beyond harm, beyond silence, forever, forward, alive, and whole. At last, completely hers. The anniversary arrived without ceremony, marked only by a calendar alert Hannah deleted before breakfast. She preferred ordinary mornings, coffee brewed, lunches packed, shoes found. The children laughed, unaware of dates that once hurt. At work, Hannah led a kickoff meeting with calm authority. She outlined scope, deadlines, and guardrails, inviting questions and naming risks. The team responded with trust. Competence felt like peace. News from the past surfaced again that afternoon. A compliance report closed remaining investigations. Final penalties assessed. No appeals pending. The case was finished. Hannah read the notice once and archived it. She walked home through the park, noticing leaves, dogs, and familiar faces. The city had absorbed the shock and moved on. So had she. Marcus met her at the door with groceries and an easy smile. They cooked together, trading stories, sharing silence. Partnership lived in these moments. After dinner, Hannah helped with homework and baths. The children argued and reconciled. Routine healed in small ways. Later, Hannah opened a box she had avoided. Inside were documents, photographs, and notes from the crisis. She sorted deliberately, keeping what mattered, discarding what did not. Control returned with each decision. She wrote a final statement for herself, not for court. It named lessons learned. Document facts, trust instincts, accept help, leave early. She signed it and closed the box. That night, a call arrived from the advocate. Funding secured for a new safety initiative. Hannah agreed to advise. Quietly, she would help without reliving. In another city, Claire faced sentencing in a related case. Cooperation reduced time, careers ended, consequences settled. Hannah felt neither relief nor anger. Distance was enough. Victor remained where he belonged, monitored and constrained. His name faded from conversation. Power, once loud, became a footnote. Hannah slept well. Morning brought rain and patience. She walked the children to school, umbrellas bumping. They talked about spelling tests and snacks. Life continued. At the office, Hannah reviewed designs and offered feedback, firm and kind. Boundaries guided every exchange. An email arrived offering a speaking slot at a conference. Hannah declined. Visibility was optional, safety was not. She chose a walk instead, breathing wet air, grounding herself. Healing was maintenance, not destination. At home, Marcus asked about plans. Hannah suggested a weekend trip, modest and nearby. Anticipation felt light. They sat together after bedtime, discussing budgets and calendars. Transparency built trust. Before sleep, Hannah stood by the window and reflected. The arc was complete. Harm had consequences. Care had continuity. Love had room. She closed the curtains and rested, confident that endings could be quiet, just, and lasting. She planned carefully, keeping calendars realistic and promises few. Boundaries remained firm, communicated early, reviewed often. When doubts surfaced, she returned to breath and facts. Progress showed itself through consistency, not speed. Friends noticed steadiness. Children mirrored calm. Nights grew longer, deeper, restorative. On weekends, the family explored nearby towns, libraries, and markets. Small rituals formed: pancakes, walks, shared music. Hannah photographed less, remembered more. Presence replaced proof. When memories visited, she acknowledged them and moved forward. No spirals, no self-blame. Compassion anchored response. The story would live online, debated and distorted. Hannah chose privacy. She invested energy where it mattered. Safety plans updated. Savings automated. Education prioritized. With time, trust became muscle memory. Fear loosened. Choice expanded. Hannah accepted joy without suspicion, grief without collapse, and responsibility without control. The balance held. She understood now. Justice closed doors, care opened futures. She chose the future. Quietly, she continued building a life defined by safety, truth, patience, partnership, and lasting peace for her family. Summer settled fully, and Hannah's life expanded beyond recovery into purpose. She signed a lease on a sunlit townhouse near the park, modest, secure, and hers. The move was deliberate, boxes labeled, routines planned, neighbors met slowly. Safety felt architectural now, built into doors, light, and distance. Work rewarded consistency. Hannah led a major project, end to end, negotiated scope, protected timelines, and delivered early. The promotion came without ceremony, just an email and trust. She accepted with gratitude and clarity, choosing hours that honored family. Money stopped being fear and became tool. Marcus supported without overshadowing. He asked, listened, followed through. Together they planned a future measured by stability. Savings, goals, school choices, emergency lists taped inside cabinets. Love lived in preparation. One afternoon, Hannah received an invitation from the community center to open a new family resource room. She hesitated, then agreed to cut the ribbon quietly. No speech, no cameras, just presence. Parents thanked her. Children played. The room filled with laughter. Victor's name appeared once more in a legal bulletin announcing final forfeitures. Hannah closed the tab. The chapter stayed closed. Accountability had done its work. That evening, Marcus proposed again, this time with a plan they built together. A simple ring. A date chosen with care, a promise spoken plainly. Hannah said yes, smiling without fear. The wedding followed months later, backyard simple, vows brief, witnesses chosen. The children scattered petals. The day felt earned. Peace felt permanent. As night fell, Hannah watched the children sleep and understood reward. Not applause, not revenge. Safety, choice, love, continuity. She wrote one last entry in her journal, thanking the version of herself who survived long enough to build. Then she closed it. Outside, the city breathed. Inside, a family rested, the story prepared to end, complete and true. It was not an ending of silence, but of continuity, earned through effort. Hannah scheduled vaccinations, parent meetings, and savings transfers. She chose calm over urgency. Marcus matched her pace, sharing calendars and chores, honoring boundaries. They hosted dinners with friends, laughter filling rooms once quiet. Trust widened. The children grew confident, curious, secure. Hannah noticed strength replacing vigilance. On weekends, they volunteered, reading to kids, organizing supplies. Giving felt balanced, not consuming. Healing had matured into service. When memories surfaced, Hannah acknowledged them, breathed, and returned to the present. She taught her children names for feelings and ways to ask for help. Safety became language. The city changed seasons again. Hannah welcomed the close, ready for the final page. Justice had closed one door and opened many windows. Hannah trusted process, people, and herself. She invested in education, health, and time. Joy returned without guilt. The reward arrived quietly each morning, carried by routines and choice. Hannah held it carefully, determined to keep building. She believed consequences mattered, and compassion endured. With love steady and boundaries firm, Hannah stepped forward into tomorrow. The story would end next, complete and satisfying, grounded in justice and care. Viewers would feel release, knowing harm met consequence and healing prevailed, closing the arc with hope. Hannah smiled, confident the ending honored truth, family, and earned happiness. She prepared for tomorrow, calm and ready, as the journey reached fulfillment. Everything aligned, and peace held. This was the promise kept. The audience would feel satisfied. The story approached its final chapter. Hannah stood ready. Peace, justice, and love remained. The end was near. Satisfaction filled the arc. Everything made sense. The journey closed. Hannah breathed easy. Justice held firm. Love endured fully. The promise was real. The arc ended, complete and true. The final morning arrived quietly, like so many mornings Hannah now trusted. Sunlight filled the townhouse kitchen as she poured coffee and watched her children eat breakfast, laughing over crumbs and stories. There were no cameras, no court dates, no alerts buzzing with dread, just life, steady and real. Marcus kissed her cheek before work, reminding her about dinner plans. She smiled, feeling grounded. Love no longer startled her. It stayed. Hannah walked the children to school through the park, holding small hands, answering questions about the day ahead. Parents nodded. Dogs passed. The city moved gently around them. Safety had become ordinary. At work, Hannah closed her laptop after a successful presentation. Applause came softly through speakers, respectful and brief. She accepted it without shrinking. Competence felt natural now. During lunch, she sat on a bench and reflected on how far she had come. From marble floors and sirens to park benches and sunlight, from fear to choice, from silence to voice. The harm that once defined her life had met consequence. The man who believed power made him untouchable had lost everything he used to control others. His downfall was not spectacle now, just record and fact. Justice had been served, fully and without compromise. Claire's name faded from memory. The allure of cruelty dissolved into irrelevance. The system corrected itself, imperfectly but firmly. Hannah returned home early and prepared dinner, humming softly. The children helped, proud of small tasks. Marcus arrived, carrying bread and warmth. They ate together, unhurried. Afterward, they sat in the living room while the children played. Hannah felt contentment settle deeply, the kind that did not demand more. Later that night, after bedtime stories and quiet, Hannah stepped onto the porch alone. The air was warm. The city lights blinked patiently. She breathed deeply, fully present. She thought of the woman she had been, terrified and trapped, and felt compassion instead of pain. Survival had led her here, but choice kept her here. Hannah understood now that a happy ending was not a dramatic victory. It was safety that lasted, love that respected, power that could not harm, consequences that restored balance. Inside, Marcus called her name softly. She turned back toward the light, toward her family, toward the life she had built deliberately and bravely. The story ended not with noise, but with peace. Hannah closed the door behind her and carried that peace forward, confident it would endure. For the audience, justice was complete. The villain fell, the innocent rose, the future healed. For Hannah, it was simply life, finally free. She smiled, knowing the ending was deserved. And tomorrow would come, gentle and hers. The end. And so, the story comes to a close. Now let me ask you something, my wonderful friends. Are you still here with me right now? If you truly are, then something in this journey has touched your heart in a quiet, personal way. Maybe it reminded you of your own struggles, your own nights of fear, or your own hope for a calmer tomorrow. This story teaches us that real strength is not loud revenge, but steady courage. As the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Healing begins the moment we choose truth over silence, boundaries over fear, and patience over anger. Another Stoic reminder says, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Pain does not have to define us, it can refine us. If this story made you pause, breathe, or see your life a little differently, then it has done its job. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be shared to remind others they are not alone, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue telling stories that heal, inspire, and stay with you long after the screen goes dark.